Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to week 4. Congratulations on finishing your first main project, right? So project 1 is in the bag, um, and as of tonight, because this is Monday right now, tonight by midnight you should have everything turned in. Project 1 plus the process memo, right, which is just responding to those little questions on the prompt, or on the Dropbox rather, just kind of talking about like your experience writing the thing. And we'll do something like that for each project. And it doesn't have to be anything big. Just your answers to the questions are fine. It shouldn't be a whole other essay or anything like that. It's just to help you think about like how it is you're going about completing these assignments, so that we can kind of track your progress essentially. Now I did send out an email as well about the invention portfolio. That's a holdout from face-to-face classes where I don't have access to a lot of different things. Unlike I do here, like I see everything that you guys do pretty much. I see the blog posts, I see your rough drafts and all that stuff. So we don't need to do that for here. So just ignore the invention portfolio part. Okay. So once that gets turned in, I'm going to try to turn it around within 48 hours and get everything back to you guys. I like for online classes to make this as fast as possible, because we don't get a lot of like one-on-one interaction. It's important to me to get this stuff back to you guys so you have my feedback as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's project 1. So that's all wrapped up. So what we're going to do now then, and what you guys have started to do this week, is to work towards project 2, which builds off your work in project 1. So as I said in last week's video, project 2 is a genre analysis, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it depends on your ability to read critically an article written from your community and an article written from the writing community, which is what we've been reading throughout the entire semester. So all the articles you read for class are from that community, right? So your job will be to compare 2 articles, one from your community, one from the writing community. Okay, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we'll talk about that here in a second. I want to talk about what's coming up for week 4. So we can take a look at the schedule right here. So as you'll see, on deck for reading for this week, it's a little bit shorter than last week, right? You've got your chapter 6 from our writing guide, and this is a really important chapter because it will help you read critically and think about the sources that you're reading to make sure that you're reading like a genuinely good source. It'll help you evaluate what's the difference between a good source and a bad source. This is a really good reading to do. And then as well as some sample student papers for project 2, which I've got pulled up over here on my screen, and I'll show you in a second, which I'll upload, and you'll see them right here. I'll upload them as soon as I'm done with this video, so read those. Okay, so on deck for this week then is to check out the readings, go over that, and then I want to see a little bit of a rough draft for project 2 by Friday. Now, probably on Wednesday, I'll open up another rough draft Dropbox for you guys, just like I did for project 1, but I'm going to have more explicit instructions this time because last time was a little bit of a it wasn't as good as I wanted it. Like I want a little bit more substantive feedback. I want to make sure everyone's turning it in. Like some of you did really good things, others I want to see a little bit more. And so I have explicit instructions about how to do that. And so what's going to happen is for this rough draft, all I'm looking for is for you guys to basically expand upon what you did in your blog post for this week. So if you remember blog post 2, which is also due tonight, Monday by midnight, just asked you to summarize your 2 articles. That summary component is a really important first step of a genre analysis. So you first have to give us a sense of what it is you're reading before you can kind of pull it apart. Okay, and so for a rough draft, all I'm going to want to see is that you've gone through and you've started to identify some of the components that you're going to want to compare and contrast between these 2 articles. If you get more than that, great. But I do want to see at least the first section of this assignment. And so let's talk about what this assignment actually is then. So as you saw on the prompt for project 2 on the syllabus and on last week's folder and all that, essentially what you're doing is you're comparing 2 articles from different communities. Now what I want to stress is you're not comparing the content, right? You're not comparing the findings of a scientific study to the work done in the Writing Center community about, freshman writers, say. What you are doing is you're comparing how those two articles are written. You're comparing like the skeleton of it, the components, right? And so we're not focused on the ideas that the author's putting forth. We're focused in on the techniques and the strategies and the mechanisms they're using to write. So we're comparing, citation style. We're comparing writing style, sentence structure, tone. We're comparing how evidence is used, right? Like the things that make this an article for this community, right? And that's what we're comparing. And so let's take a look at one of these sample essays, and you'll see this play out a little bit better. Let me drag this over here. Here we go. Okay, so this is a good example of what we're looking for. And what you'll see is, as you're reading this, and you should see this on the prompt too, is that there's basically 3 sections to this assignment. So there's, the first section, which is an introduction section. Or, I'm sorry, not an introduction, identification section. The next section is a analysis section, and the last section will be a short reflection. So let's talk about what each of these sections are. Okay. So obviously you should have a brief introduction for your assignment. But each section is going to be doing different things. Okay, so when I say identification, what I'm looking for is that you are going to go into your 2 articles and you're going to pull out the pieces that you want to compare. So for example, let's say you wanted to compare how your community uses evidence versus how the writing community uses evidence, right? Maybe in your community it's really scientific. It's all about the data, whereas in the writing center community it's all about like the author and their ideas and their opinions, right? Like, so evidence is very different between those 2 communities. And let's say you want to compare those, because what you can see is like the differences between these 2 things shows us that your community expects and does things differently than this other community. Okay. So what you're going to do then is for your essay, you're going to go into both articles and you're going to pull out pieces like that you want to talk about, and you're going to put them in the identification section. And so it's exactly that. You're identifying what it is that you want to talk about, essentially. So let's see how this plays out. So for example, we've got the introduction of the article here. And they give us a brief kind of summary of the article. So this author is saying the most scholarly articles contain an abstract providing a brief summary. So this abstract is located on the front page. The topic of the article was clearly identified, the community it appeals to. The title of the article contains specific keywords. And so the author is going through, and for this particular article, is identifying all of the components that make this a coherent article. So there's an abstract, there's a clear topic, the title is really clear and obvious, the name of the journal is right there, right, and so on and so forth. And it has these specific kind of like keywords, and it has this specific statement of purpose and things like that. So these are all the things that make this article a really coherent article that belongs to this community. So what that means is that this author can then go into this other article, Writing and Knowing Towards a Knowing Process, and pull out things that make this an article a coherent article. So the audience is the community, the articles serve different purposes, they contain similarities, the context is different, the title is on the front page too. But so essentially what they've done is they've gone in and they've identified these are the main parts of this one, these are the main parts of this one. Okay, so that's your identification section. So then what happens is they can go into the analysis section and then tell us, okay, so what do we think about these differences and similarities, right? And so if you notice that there's a difference between citation styles, or between how evidence is used, or between language, right? Like one's a really casual tone and one's a very academic tone. And if that's something that you notice, then tell us what you think about that, and like why you think that is, what you think that means for your community. What does that tell us about your community? So I'll give you an example. If I were to compare an article from my community, like the English literature community, to a science one, I'd say one of the biggest things that we notice is the way that we use citations and evidence, right? When I quote something, I'm really focused in on the person that said that, or the person that wrote that, because I'm interested in this one person because they're the one producing the ideas. Whereas the science community is more interested in, when they're quoting something or they're using data, they're interested in when was this taken, when did this data originate, like what is the date that this came around, because they want to make sure they're using the most current information. right? So we have two pretty big differences there. One's focused on an author, one's focused on the date. What I can say is that, this difference that I notice, I think, is because in the English literature, we're not worried about, when something was produced. We're more interested in, the person that actually produced an idea, because we work with a lot of old ideas. Where in the sciences, the things that they're doing depends on them using the most current research. And so they have to make sure that they're foregrounding that date, right? And so that's how you do that analysis, right? You take this difference that you notice, you identify the two components as they exist in each article, and then you tell me what that tells you. Okay? You say, like, look, I see this thing, and this is what I think. And so that's your goal for the assignment. That is how you do a genre analysis. Okay? And what's the most important thing that I can't stress enough, that you're not focused on the ideas, you're focused on the actual elements that make this an article: abstracts, citation styles, sentence structures, so on and so forth. Okay, so just to recap, make sure that you get through the reading for this week. And also, just real quick, notice that there is a quiz for this week on chapter 6, so make sure you get that done by the end of the week. So do the reading, take the quiz, upload your rough draft by Friday, and stay tuned for explicit instruction on how to do that. And I will get your project ones back to you as soon as possible. All right, thanks, guys.